Hello and welcome Exiles to my, I think it's second Ascendant build this league. And this time I wanted to try out the dual wielding since Gladiator got reworked and you get double inherent bonuses from dual wielding. So what's better, dual wielding weapons than running no weapons at all. Completely unarmed with Hollow Palm Technique. Hollow Palm Technique says as long as we are unencumbered, which means we can't have any weapons in our hands and we can't have any gloves, that will count us as being dual wielding. It will give us more attack speed and physical damage per 10 dexterity. So, this entire build is about stacking dexterity. In this case, we have 2200 dexterity. Defensive wise with this build, we are block capped through the Gladiator, which grants us double bonuses from dual wielding. We get Versatile Combatant, dual wield and block wheel, block, 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 and then we are currently at 65, which is block capped in this case. No lucky block in this build, unfortunately. We are almost rest capped. The only thing that isn't rest capped is chaos resistance, but since we are lacking a shield slot and a glove slot, we are very tight on resistances. But chaos resistance isn't a must. We are using Grace as our defensive aura, together with Flesh and Stone. Tujin, you're being too loud. I gotta walk over here. So, we have evasion from attacks, we have capped block spell block and attack block. We have Flesh and Stone against physical damage from hits. We are ailment immune through Ancestral Vision, which says that modifies the chance to suppress spell damage, also applies to avoid elemental ailments at 50% of its value. Since we are stacking Dexterity, Mage Bane is pretty much an obvious choice. Sure, we get less attack evasion, but we get 1% chance to suppress spell damage per 15 Dexterity. Since we have 2,200 Dexterity, that's a lot of spell suppression. So, based on all that spell suppression, this will grant us a truck ton of ailment avoidance. We get 4 plus 8% here, so that's 12. And we can get 17% from the boots, which puts us at 102% chance to avoid ailment. So we are ailment immune. Offensively, as I talked about earlier, we get Hollow Palm Technique, increased attack speed more attack speed when unencumbered. We get flat physical damage with melee hits per 10 dexterity. And since our flat physical is so high, I would also recommend running a Hatred. Hatred grants us up to 40% of physical damage given as extra cold damage. Not taken. Fizz as extra cold. We are a non-crit build, since unarmed or can't crit unless using the Rigwald's Amulet. Then this is just 40% more damage. Since we're stacking so much dexterity, our accuracy rating is pretty much straight up higher than a life. 5,800 accuracy versus our 4,700 life. So 40% more damage. We are leeching most of the time, so we can add this wheel for more attack speed and damage when leeching. And we also get the mana leech node from here, with some leech being instant. Since our base damage is so high, straight up over 1 million at least, depending on which skill you use, freeze is very potent. So we can take this Cold Master Wheel for take permanently 5% increased damage for each time they'll be frozen, up to 50%. That's 50% increased damage taken. If we're standing close to the boss for 100 seconds, we get 50% more damage from the Gladiator. We get Taste of Hate for another 15% of Fizz as extra cold. And Brutal Restraint with a specific number, preferably with some resistance in the node, in this area, like we have here, cold resistance. We could get, I think it's up to 4 or 5 dexterity wheels. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 dexterity in this case. Another thing you can slap on the build is a tattoo of the Tukohama Warrior, which says that melee hits which stun has a 5% chance to fortify. 5% doesn't sound like much. But since we're hitting 1 billion times pretty much a second with Volcanic Fish of Snaking, this thing, when mapping, caps us at 20 fortify non-stop. It is that good. 5% only. Crafting my gear was rather simple. You get a Fractal Forts, that's the only unique we really have, which says that we get increased elemental damage per 10 dexterity and some life per 10 intelligence. The critical damage doesn't really work for us since we're a non-crit build. I got a 80% cost or reservation multiplier instead of the normal 90%, just to save a skill point. It's a little bit more expensive, like 5 Divines, but 5 Divines isn't that much. This chest piece was pretty expensive. The base, well, I bought this fracture for, I think it's 25 Divines. which grants us attack speed based on 25 dexterity, so 1% per 25. And with the Eat of Worlds implicit, we can take 1 less damage per 210 dexterity, so in this case it's pretty much 10% less damage taken. Actually make it 11%, but it doesn't really matter. The amulet and the belt are both synthesized implicit with increased dexterity. If you could get some resistances as well, that would be good, but it's not mandatory. All you do when crafting this is using the Deafening Essence of Sorrow for guaranteed dexterity, and you use that until you hit a tier 1 or tier 2 resistance and a high life roll. Preferably with open suffix or prefix, you can benchcraft something on top of it. Same goes with Amethyst Ring. You can use the Essence, or you can use the Reforged Chaos until you get a high Chaos roll on one of the rings at least, plus high dexterity. You can get a synthesized ring with curse enemies with frostbite on hit, and you spam dexterity, what's called essence, until you hit high resistance plus chaos, and preferably high life. I didn't hit the high life. I probably still have to recraft this at some point, but I just haven't been bothered doing it yet. It's only 100 more life, probably with all the increase from the tree, so it's not really that much of a big deal. Boots, same thing. Get a fractured base, preferably T1 resistance. Use the essence, dexterity essence, until you hit high res, high life, craft on movement speed, or yeah, and it's done. Since we're attacking so fast, getting rage through Veteran's Wrath is probably your best bet. So because that's 30% more damage. So recommend that Anoint. We have, as you might see on my character, I have 2 Mjolnirs and a Repentance in my slots. But as you might see on my character, I'm not wearing them at all. It's because I don't meet the stat requirements, which means I'll still count as being unarmed. But what it lets me do is freely swap my weapon slots by pressing X. If I didn't have these 2 here, if I press X, it will tell me to you need a weapon or equipment in your weapon slots to use this button, which is really annoying. So just get an Instrumentis and some trash gear with stats until you can wear them, and then replace them with your dexterity gear. Same goes with Repentance. I'm not using its stats. I can't use its stats. It's just so I can slot jewels in them. Well, jewels, gems. On my weapon swap, I have Dancing Dervish. Dancing Dervish says whenever I hit an enemy, I'm starting to gain Rampage. Once you see the Rampage number over here, my weapon will become unavailable. The weapon turns into 2 minions that start spinning. Which means we can add a Culling Strike and Blind to help us out with our pretty minor evasion rating of only 12,000-ish. And the Cull, of course, helps. And some taunts to make enemies, well, deal less damage to you, or don't focus you as much. But as you might see, when I'm using the sword, I can't use my Volcanic Fish of Snaking, which means I added a Cyclone to it, which means I just walk up to a group, spin for like a split second, that will hit them so many times so that the Rampage pretty much triggers instantly, I lose my weapon, and I can start using the Volcanic Fish of Snaking. When doing bosses, I would recommend using Ice Crash instead. Ice Crash, sure, it's a smaller AoE, but much higher damage, because this has a 100% physical converted to cold. Volcanic Fissure only has 60% to fire, which means we pretty much lose quite a bit of flat damage, but we can always use Cold Mastery to convert 40% of physical to cold, so we don't lose all of it. Now, the 60% sounds pretty bad, but since we have 40% Fist is extra cold, this doesn't really do that much. It hurts the DPS, yes, but the clearing is so good. This thing goes off screen, chases enemies down. It's basically free off screen clearing. And the damage is high enough for you to freeze enemies and so on and so on and so on. When doing bosses such as Ether Worlds and so on and so on, I'll recommend using Ice Crash instead, because of the much higher damage. Sure, small AoE, but you will deal a much bigger freeze to them and chill, which will help you immensely during boss fights. So, that's the build. I really enjoyed this build. It was really fun to build, it was really fun to play, and it's probably my build of the league from what I've made so far. The live stacking Ascendants was fun, but nothing spectacular. My mana burn stacking Slayer with Cyclone is fun, but the only clunky thing about it is that if I accidentally walk into a mana burn ring rare enemy, it pretty much ruins the stacks straight up and I have to start over. The dexterity, no, I'm saying, endurance charge stacking Juggernaut was fun, but nothing spectacular, just really expensive. And the Bleed League starter after my terrible League starter with an Ascendant, not Ascendant, Chieftain, trying to use the retaliation skills, but not through block, and instead use the Arsenal of Vengeance, which was a terrible League start. I would never recommend anyone even touching this keystone. It is that terrible. It's dog shit. Worst keystone in the game, hands down. So that's my build of the league so far. I don't know if I'll even come up making anything else, but it's not really anything else I can play right now, so I'll probably make 1 or 2 more builds this league. Really enjoyed this build, highly recommend playing it. So thanks for watching.